How did the North African population become lighter over time? I'm going to present a hypothesis based on oral accounts from the region. Disclaimer, I'm not intending to offend anybody, rather to show how colonization created colorism. It seems to have happened somewhere in the colonial era 500 years ago. After the Moors, or black Muslims, were defeated in Andalusia by Spain and Portugal in the Reconquista, Portugal started exploring West Africa, or Guinea as they called it, by sending slave trader ships down West Sahara, Mauritania, all the way to Senegambia region. During 1441, there was a distinction between Moors and blacks, and this distinction was religion, according to the Portuguese early accounts. The first slaves that the Portuguese took were actually Moors, but over time, the Portuguese started targeting the black pagans, which they used the N-word, because they could religiously justify in doing so, taking them to Portugal and baptizing them. Therefore, the Moorish and black divide historically was only based on religion. Are you Muslim? Moor takrur. Are you non-Muslim? Then you are a pagan. However, according to my analysis of Futa Toro history and also transatlantic slave trade history, that has changed over time. When the transatlantic slave trade started growing, many of those populations actually got significantly reduced in West Africa. So the Europeans started exploring more and more grounds to capture slaves in. So the slave raiders started going more and more inland to Africa to capture slaves from all sorts of villages. Therefore, the Europeans expanded blackness to encompass more and more and more tribes. So tribes that previously were Moorish were now black and maybe potentially targeted for slavery because the Europeans needed it for the colonies. Sometime 1700s, 1800s, blacks started becoming a race. What happened in North Africa and the Middle East was that they wanted to differentiate themselves as much as possible from the blacks to avoid slavery. So the North Africans and Middle Easterns and also Mauritanians started intermarrying Turkish women to produce a lighter color such as my own, and they started breaking apart the Moroccan and Moorish identity as much as possible from the black identities in order to avoid that they become enslaved, because Moorish was a slave exempt category. So was Fulani in Futa Toro also, but that's not part of the point. The point is slavery created a colorism in the Middle East and North Africa to avoid any of those identities that the colonizers called black and therefore were targeted for slavery. Therefore, people married lighter skin out of survival. And people wanted to hold on to identities like Sanhaja, Moor, or any identity that is slave exempt. What's the situation today? Slavery is abolished long ago. There are no more black races. So now, when all the black people reclaim their rightful history, the North Africans are stuck in those colonial mentalities of trying to differentiate themselves as much as possible from those populations.